A millionaire pretending to be poor decides to work at his own hotel and ends up falling in love with the manager. But when he meets her family, he is shocked by what he discovers. James Adams was sitting in the bar of an exclusive club, surrounded by the luxury his fortune could buy. But despite all the wealth around him, he felt empty. At 27, James had experienced romantic relationships that always ended the same way. Women attracted to his money, not to who he really was. "I'm tired of this, Kevin," James confided to his best friend as they drank whiskey in crystal glasses. "I will never find someone who truly loves me." Kevin, James's childhood friend, pondered for a moment before offering an unusual solution. "James, why don't you disguise yourself and go work at one of your own hotels?" Kevin suggested. "That way, you can meet people who don't know who you really are." James raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "What would someone in my position do in a family hotel, pretending to be an ordinary worker?" he asked, incredulous. Kevin shrugged and smiled. "Exactly that. No one would expect to see a millionaire working as an employee. You would have the chance to meet genuine people." Despite initial resistance, the idea stuck with James. When he got home that night, he couldn't stop thinking about Kevin's proposal. After hours of reflection, he decided to give the bold plan a chance. The next morning, James went to his mother, Linda Adams's office, a strong and determined woman who ran the hotel chain with an iron fist. When he explained his plan, he saw Linda's expression change from surprise to concern. "James, what are you thinking?" Linda questioned, visibly distressed. "You've never worked a day in your life. How will you adapt to this crazy idea?" James took a deep breath, determined. "Mom, I'm tired of being seen only as the millionaire's son. I want a chance to find someone who likes me for who I am, not for my money. I need to do this." After a long silence, Linda finally relented, sighing. "You're an adult now and can make your own decisions. But remember, everything in life has consequences. I hope you're prepared for them." Determined, James chose a distant city to avoid being recognized. If he went to the hotel in the city where he lived, everyone would know he was the heir to the Adams hotel chain. He found a modest, furnished apartment, a stark contrast to the opulence of the mansion where he grew up. But to his surprise, he felt relieved by the simplicity. As he settled into the new apartment, James reflected on the new journey he was about to start. The next day, he would begin working at the hotel, disguised as an ordinary employee, in search of something money couldn't buy, true love. And with that in mind, he was ready to face the challenges ahead. James woke up early on his first day of work at the hotel. He felt a mix of anxiety and excitement as he got ready, donning the simple receptionist uniform. Looking at himself in the mirror, he saw a version of himself he had never imagined. There he was, the heir to a luxury hotel chain, about to live as a common worker. When he arrived at the hotel, James was greeted by the manager, Melissa, a blonde woman in her 30s, whose friendliness and professionalism were evident from the first moment. "Welcome to the team, James," Melissa said with a warm smile. "I'll show you around the hotel and introduce you to the rest of the team." James followed Melissa through the hotel corridors, amazed at the attention to detail in every corner. Although it was part of his inheritance, he had never been to this particular hotel. Melissa explained every aspect of the hotel's operations with patience and clarity, answering all his questions. "This is the reception where you'll be working. It's a busy place, so you'll have the opportunity to meet many guests and employees," Melissa said as they arrived at the lobby. James nodded, feeling more confident. "I'm excited to start," he replied, smiling. During the tour, James met several colleagues, but one in particular caught his attention: Edward, the maintenance manager. Edward was a 58-year-old man with a calm and wise demeanor. He greeted James with a firm handshake and a welcoming smile. "Welcome, young man," Edward said. "If you need anything or want to talk, I'll be around." In the following days, James quickly adapted to the hotel's routine. At the reception, he dealt with a variety of guests, learning to solve problems and provide impeccable service. The constant interaction with different people began to reveal a more human and accessible side of him, which had always been hidden behind his wealth. The friendship with Edward grew stronger over time. During breaks, James and Edward often talked in the hotel garden. Edward became a paternal figure to James, sharing stories and offering valuable advice about life. "You know, James," Edward began in one of these conversations, "life is full of surprises. You never know when you're going to find something or someone that changes everything." James reflected on Edward's words. He felt that this new chapter in his life was just beginning and that he had much to learn. Edward's advice was particularly valuable when James talked about his failed romantic experiences. He confided in Edward about his disappointment with women who were only interested in his money. "Be patient, James," Edward advised. "Sometimes the right person appears when we least expect it, and when that happens, you'll know it's real." James nodded, finding comfort in Edward's words. Meanwhile, he continued to grow closer to Melissa. Her friendliness and efficiency were inspiring, and James admired the way she led the team with respect and kindness. The first days at the hotel were intense but extremely rewarding. James began to feel that, finally, he was on the right path to finding what he had always wanted, a genuine and meaningful life, far from the superficialities that money brought. As he wrapped up another day of work, James felt grateful for the opportunity to live this experience. He knew he still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful and excited about the future. Days at the hotel turned into weeks, and James felt increasingly comfortable in his new role. He dedicated himself to the reception work, meeting guests and solving problems with the same effectiveness he always applied to the family business, though this time in a more personal and direct manner. During this period, James and Melissa began spending more time together. Initially, they had only quick conversations in the hallway or during team meetings, but these interactions soon turned into long talks during breaks and after work. They talked about everything, from funny work stories to dreams and ambitions for the future. "Did you know I always wanted to travel the world?" Melissa said in one of these conversations while they were having coffee in the hotel's small cafe. "Really? Me too," James replied, smiling. "I've always wanted to explore new places, but I've never had the chance to do it as a regular person, without all the glamour and unwanted attention." Melissa laughed, her eyes sparkling with interest. "I think it would be amazing to travel without expectations, just enjoying the experience for what it is." James began to realize he felt something deeper for Melissa. It wasn't just admiration for her competence and friendliness. It was something more intimate. His heart raced every time she was near, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. Melissa, in turn, also noticed something different. James was unlike any other man she had known. There was a humility and sincerity in his gestures that attracted her. She felt comfortable around him, as if she could be completely herself. However, neither of them dared to admit their feelings. Both were afraid of ruining the budding friendship. Edward, always observant, noticed the change in James. During one of their garden conversations, he commented, "You seem different, James. There's something in your eyes, a kind of sparkle that wasn't there before." James sighed, smiling. "I think you're right, Edward. I think I'm starting to feel something for Melissa." Edward smiled understandingly. "Remember what I said about patience, young man. True love doesn't need to be rushed. Let things happen naturally." James reflected on these words as the days passed. He knew he was falling for Melissa, but he also knew he needed to respect her time and space. He didn't want to force anything. He wanted everything to happen naturally and genuinely. One night, after a long day of work, James and Melissa decided to walk along the beach near the hotel. The sound of the waves and the cool breeze created a perfect setting for a more intimate conversation. "You know, James, I'm glad you came to work here," Melissa said, looking at the horizon. "You brought a new energy to the hotel, and I think we all feel it." James smiled, feeling a wave of happiness. "And I'm happy to be here. This place, these people, and you, all of this has been amazing." They continued walking side by side in silence, each lost in their thoughts. For James, that moment was more than special. He felt connected to Melissa in a way he had never felt with anyone before. The feelings between them grew each day, but both knew they still had a long way to go. James kept reflecting on Edward's advice, knowing that patience and sincerity were essential. Meanwhile, Melissa began to realize that maybe this new hotel employee was more than he seemed. James felt a mix of nervousness and excitement when he finally decided to ask Melissa out. The weeks of spending time together and their growing connection encouraged him to take the next step. He knew he could no longer ignore the feelings he had for her. One sunny morning, James found Melissa in the hotel cafe where she was having her usual coffee before starting work. With a confident smile, he approached. "Melissa, are you free tonight?" he asked, trying to sound casual but feeling his heart race. Melissa looked up from her cup, surprised. "Yes, I am. Why?" "Would you like to go out with me? I thought we could watch a movie and then have dinner." "What do you think?" James asked, anxiously waiting for her response. Melissa smiled, feeling a pleasant warmth spread through her chest. "I'd love to, James. Is 8 o'clock okay with you?" "Perfect," he replied, almost relieved. The day passed quickly, and when the clock struck 7, James was already preparing for the date. He chose a casual shirt and jeans, wanting to look nice but not overdo it. When he arrived at the hotel to pick up Melissa, his heart raced when he saw her. She looked beautiful in a simple yet elegant dress that highlighted her natural beauty. "You look stunning, Melissa," James complimented, genuinely impressed. "Thank you, James. You look great too," Melissa replied, smiling. They took a taxi to a small cinema in the city center. They watched a romantic comedy that, to James's surprise, was the perfect choice. They laughed together, commenting on the funny scenes and sharing popcorn. James felt there was no better place to be than beside Melissa. After the movie, they went to a cozy nearby restaurant. The intimate atmosphere and soft music created the perfect setting for the rest of the evening. They talked about their lives, dreams, and even the little things that made them happy every day. "I've always wanted to start my own business," Melissa confessed while savoring dessert. "Maybe a cafe or a small bookstore, a place where people could feel at home." James listened attentively, fascinated by the passion and determination in her words. "I can see you doing that," he said, holding Melissa's hand across the table. "You have a special way of making people feel welcome." Melissa blushed slightly, feeling flattered. "Thank you, James. That means a lot to me." The night flew by, and before they knew it, it was time to head back. Instead of going directly to the hotel, they decided to walk a bit through the city. They ended up in a quiet square near Melissa's home. The place was lit by soft lights, and the sound of distant laughter and conversations created a charming atmosphere. "Shall we sit for a while?" Melissa suggested, pointing to a wooden bench under a majestic tree. James agreed, sitting next to her. The night air was cool and pleasant, and they sat in silence for a few moments, just enjoying each other's company. "I really enjoyed tonight, Melissa. You are special to me," James said, looking into her eyes. "I enjoyed it too, James," Melissa replied, smiling. "You are special to me too." They stayed there under the stars, feeling the magic of the moment. James leaned in slightly, and Melissa closed her eyes, accepting the kiss that would seal the beginning of something new and wonderful. The kiss was sweet and tender, and when they parted, both knew that something significant had changed between them. A new chapter in their lives was beginning, and they were ready to explore it together. James felt a genuine happiness, something he had never experienced before. As he walked back home, he smiled, remembering Edward's words about true love and how life was full of surprises. And what a wonderful surprise Melissa had become. The days following James and Melissa's first date were filled with happiness and new discoveries. Their connection deepened, and James experienced a genuine joy he had never felt before. He knew Melissa was special and wanted to learn more about her life, especially about her family. One sunny afternoon, while walking through the same square where they had shared their first kiss, James decided to open his heart. "Melissa, I would like to meet your father. I think it's important for both of us that I learn more about your family," James said, holding her hand. Melissa paused for a moment, surprised by the request. She knew her father was a central figure in her life, and introducing him to James would be a significant step. "I think it's a good idea," Melissa replied, smiling. "My dad is a wonderful person, and I'm sure you'll get along. How about this Sunday?" James agreed, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. When Sunday arrived, James felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement as he prepared to meet Melissa's father. He took a taxi to her house, his heart beating faster with every mile. Upon arrival, he took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The door opened, revealing Melissa in a beautiful floral dress, smiling at him. "You look beautiful, Melissa," James said, feeling his heart race. "Thank you, James. Are you ready to meet my dad?" she replied, her eyes sparkling. "I'm ready," James said, though his nerves were evident. They entered the house, and James was surprised to see Edward, his colleague from the hotel, sitting on the couch. Edward immediately started laughing, recognizing James. "I told you, James, life is full of surprises," Edward exclaimed, still laughing. James, incredulous, smiled back. "How is this possible?" he asked. "When my daughter was looking for her first job, I recommended her to the late Charles Adams," Edward explained. "She's been working there ever since." James was stunned to learn that Edward knew his father. Edward added, "We don't need to expose our personal lives at work. We need to be professional. That's what I always say." James spent the rest of the lunch deep in thought. The connection between him, Melissa, and Edward now seemed much deeper than he had imagined. After lunch, he knew it was time to be honest. He called Edward and Melissa to talk in the living room. "Edward, Melissa, there's something I need to reveal," James began nervously. "Edward, you said you knew Charles Adams, the hotel owner." "Yes, I did," confirmed Edward. James took a deep breath before continuing. "Charles was my father. I am the heir to the hotel." Melissa felt extremely uncomfortable and somewhat betrayed. James had said nothing about this, and now came with a bombshell revelation. Edward, however, began laughing again. He asked for James's ID, and when he handed it over, Edward laughed even more. "Why are you laughing, Edward?" James asked, puzzled. "Because you look just like your father when he was young," Edward replied with a nostalgic smile. "I've been told that," admitted James, still processing everything. After the shocking revelation during lunch, James felt a great deal of tension in the air. Melissa withdrew to the garden to process the information, and James knew he needed to clarify everything before the situation worsened. He followed her there, finding her sitting on a bench, clearly shaken. "Melissa, please listen to me," James pleaded, sitting next to her. "I know I should have told you sooner, but I wanted you to know me for who I am, not for my money or my position. Please understand that." Melissa remained silent for a few moments, taking deep breaths as she processed James's words. She looked at him, still shaken, but there was understanding in her eyes. "James, I understand your motivations. It must have been hard living with so many people approaching you for the wrong reasons. I just need some time to adjust to all this." James nodded, relieved to see that Melissa was willing to listen. "I just want to be honest with you from now on. I never meant to deceive you, Melissa. I just wanted a chance to be myself and find someone who loves me for who I am." Melissa gave a slight smile, feeling the sincerity in his words. "I believe you, James. We'll get through this together. Just no more secrets, okay?" "Agreed," James said, feeling a huge weight lifted off his shoulders. They returned inside, where Edward was waiting for them. He had a look of understanding and warmth. James realized there was more to be said and decided to take another step towards honesty. "Edward, can I ask you more about your history with my father?" James inquired, feeling more at ease. Edward nodded, indicating for James to sit again. "Of course, James. Your father, Charles Adams, was a remarkable man. I met him when I started working as a manager at the hotel. He always made a point of getting to know his employees and maintaining a close relationship with everyone. That was something rare and very valuable." James listened intently, eager to learn more about his father. "Charles had a clear vision of how he wanted the hotels to be managed," Edward continued. "He believed that the key to a good business was treating people well, both guests and employees. He inspired me to be who I am today." Melissa, who was listening to the conversation, felt moved hearing about the kindness and integrity of James's father. "Your father was a great man, James, and it's evident that you've inherited much from him," said Edward with a smile. James felt proud but also humbled hearing this. "Thank you, Edward. Those words mean a lot to me." The conversation continued in a light and relaxed manner, with Edward sharing funny and inspiring stories about Charles Adams. James felt that little by little he was getting to know his father's legacy better and connecting more deeply with him. During the conversation, Edward asked a question that caught James by surprise. "And your mother, Linda, how is she?" asked Edward. "Linda is my mother. You know her?" James asked, curious. Edward nodded. "Yes, I do. But I'm sorry, James, there are things I can't tell you. It's better to ask her," Edward replied, somewhat enigmatically. This response intrigued James, but he decided to respect Edward's advice and talk to his mother about it later. At the end of the afternoon, when James and Melissa said goodbye to Edward, there was a sense of renewal and hope in the air. The truth had been revealed, and despite the difficulties, they had overcome it together. James knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he felt more confident and prepared to face them with Melissa by his side. As they walked back to James's apartment under the starry sky, he held Melissa's hand firmly. "Thank you for understanding and standing by me, Melissa. I truly believe we can overcome anything together." Melissa smiled, feeling the same. "I believe so too, James. Let's move forward, one step at a time." As the days passed, James continued working at the hotel as usual. His relationship with Melissa grew stronger, and he couldn't stop thinking about the conversation he had with Edward about his mother. One day, he decided to talk to Melissa about it. "Melissa, I want you to meet my mother," James said as they walked through the hotel garden. Melissa felt a bit worried but agreed. "Of course, James. I think that's a good idea." And so, with reconciliation and mutual understanding, James and Melissa began to build a future together based on truth, trust, and love. They knew that visiting James's mother would be an important next step in their journey. The day was sunny and peaceful as James and Melissa prepared for the trip to the Adams mansion. Melissa was a bit nervous, but James reassured her by holding her hand firmly. He knew this meeting would be crucial for both of them. "Everything will be fine, Melissa. My mum is going to love meeting you," James said, smiling. "I hope so. I'm a little nervous, but I'm ready," Melissa replied, trying to calm herself. They took a taxi to the airport and boarded a flight to the city where the Adams family mansion was located. The plane ride was relatively short, but it gave Melissa enough time to think about what was to come, and for James to mentally prepare to introduce his girlfriend to his mother. Upon arrival, they took another taxi that brought them to the impressive Adams mansion. Melissa was speechless at the sight of the grand residence with its beautiful gardens and elegant architecture. James felt a mix of nostalgia and excitement being back at his old home. When they rang the doorbell, Linda opened the door with a welcoming smile. She embraced James warmly, showing how much she had missed him. "James, my son, it's so good to see you," Linda exclaimed, her eyes shining with happiness. "Mom, this is Melissa," James introduced. Linda looked at Melissa with tenderness and sympathy. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Melissa. James has told me a lot about you," said Linda, extending her hand. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Adams," replied Melissa, a bit shy. "Please call me Linda," she said, smiling. They entered the mansion and were led to the living room, where a table was already set for lunch. The environment was elegant and welcoming, reflecting Linda's style. During lunch, the conversation was light and relaxed. Linda made sure to learn more about Melissa, asking about her family and her work at the hotel. Melissa, in turn, was curious about Linda and Charles's story. "So, Linda, how did you and Charles meet?" Melissa asked, interested. Linda smiled, fondly recalling the past. "Charles and I met at the hotel. I was a receptionist and he, the owner, was always there, personally overseeing everything. We knew who we were from the start, but he never let his position influence our relationship." Melissa and James exchanged surprised glances at Linda's frankness. She continued, "It was shocking at first to realize the responsibility he carried, but I saw that he had good intentions, and that's how our love blossomed, based on truth and trust." Melissa felt a deep connection with Linda, admiring her strength and sincerity. James, on the other hand, was moved to hear more about his parents' love. "Linda, I wanted to thank you for welcoming me so warmly," Melissa said, smiling. "I can see where James got his kindness and sincerity from." Linda held Melissa's hand, giving her a warm look. "Thank you, Melissa. I'm very happy that James has found someone like you. You have my blessing and my support." After lunch, Linda took James and Melissa for a walk through the mansion's gardens, sharing more stories about Charles and the family legacy. Melissa felt increasingly integrated and welcomed. After the walk, they gathered in the cozy living room of the mansion. Linda served tea and desserts, creating a warm and intimate atmosphere. "Stay here tonight," Linda suggested. "We have many guest rooms, and this way we can talk more, and you can rest before your trip back." James looked at Melissa, who nodded with a smile. "We'd love to, Mom. Thank you," James replied. As night fell, the trio continued to chat, sharing laughter and stories. Melissa felt more and more at home, and James was happy to see the growing connection between his mother and his girlfriend. As they prepared for bed, Melissa spoke to James in a low voice. "Your mom is amazing, James. I'm so happy to be here." "Me too, Melissa. This means a lot to me," James replied, holding her hand. The night at the Adams mansion was peaceful and filled with meaningful conversations. James and Melissa felt welcomed and at home, further strengthening their bonds with Linda. Inspired by the love stories and advice from his mother, James began to reflect deeply on his own relationship with Melissa. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast in the mansion's garden, James took Melissa for a walk through the same garden where he had played as a child. He knew this would be the perfect moment for an important step. "Melissa, there's something I've been thinking about since we arrived here," James began, holding her hands as they walked among the flowers. "What is it, James?" Melissa asked, curious but with a smile on her lips. James took a deep breath, feeling the emotion rise to the surface. "My mother and father had a love story based on truth, respect, and trust. I see the same in us. Since I met you, you've brought joy and meaning to my life. I want to spend the rest of my days with you, building a life together." Melissa stopped, her eyes filling with tears of happiness. James knelt before her, taking a ring from his pocket. "Melissa, will you marry me?" James asked, looking into her eyes with hope and love. Melissa brought her hand to her mouth, surprised and emotional. "Yes, James, of course I will," she replied enthusiastically. James slipped the ring onto Melissa's finger and stood up, embracing her tightly as she cried with joy. Linda, who had been watching from a distance, ran to congratulate them, tears in her eyes. "I'm so happy for both of you," Linda exclaimed, hugging them both. With Linda's blessing, they began planning the wedding. James and Melissa decided to hold the ceremony at the same hotel where they had met, a place that symbolized the beginning of their journey together. Preparations began quickly. Linda took an active role in organizing, helping to plan every detail with enthusiasm and joy. Melissa chose a simple but elegant dress, while James opted for a classic suit that reflected his personal style. "I want our wedding to be a reflection of who we are, something intimate and full of love," Melissa said, as they discussed the details with Linda. James agreed, feeling more connected to Melissa with each passing day. Linda's support was invaluable, and the love story of his parents served as constant inspiration. Invitations were sent out, and the date was set. The hotel prepared for the grand celebration, decorated elegantly and warmly, reflecting the simplicity and beauty of James and Melissa's love. That night, after a day full of planning, James and Melissa sat in the mansion's garden, watching the stars. "I can't believe we're getting married at the place where we met," Melissa said, lying on James's shoulder. "It's the perfect place to start our life together," James replied, stroking her hair. "I can't wait to see you walking down the aisle." "And I can't wait to see you waiting for me there," Melissa said, smiling. And so, with the support and blessing of Linda, James and Melissa continued to plan their future together, knowing they had a solid foundation of love, trust, and respect to build their life on. The preparation for the wedding would be just the beginning of a journey full of adventures and unforgettable moments. The wedding day finally arrived, bringing with it a mixture of emotion and anticipation. The hotel was beautifully decorated, reflecting the simplicity and elegance that James and Melissa desired. White flowers and soft lights adorned the hall, creating a magical and welcoming atmosphere. Friends, family, and colleagues began to arrive, each with radiant smiles and warm hugs. Linda was glowing, organizing the final details and welcoming guests with her usual grace and friendliness. In the bride's room, Melissa was stunning in her simple yet elegant dress. The white dress highlighted her natural beauty, and she was surrounded by her friends, all helping with the final preparations. Edward entered the room, dressed in an impeccable suit, and his eyes filled with tears as he saw his daughter. "You look beautiful, Melissa," Edward said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." "Thank you, Dad," Melissa replied, hugging him tightly. "I'm so happy you are here with me." Meanwhile, in the groom's room, James was finishing getting ready, adjusting his classic suit. Kevin, his childhood friend and best man, was by his side, helping with the final details. "Are you ready for this, James?" Kevin asked, smiling. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," James replied with a confident smile. The ceremony began punctually, with all the guests taking their seats in the decorated hall. Soft music started to play, and all eyes turned to the entrance of the hall. Edward walked Melissa down the aisle with dignity and emotion. James's eyes filled with tears as he saw Melissa approaching, and he felt his heart race with happiness. "Take good care of her," Edward said, handing Melissa's hand to James. "I promise I will," James replied, emotional. Linda, observing the scene, couldn't help but remember her own wedding to Charles with emotion. Memories of her great love flooded her, and she felt a deep connection to the present moment. The ceremony was conducted simply but full of meaning. James and Melissa exchanged sincere vows, promising to love, respect, and care for each other for the rest of their lives. "With this ring, I make you mine," James said, placing the ring on Melissa's finger. "With this ring, I make you mine," Melissa replied, doing the same. When they were declared husband and wife, applause and tears of joy filled the hall. James and Melissa kissed, sealing their union with love and hope. The reception that followed was full of laughter, dancing, and unforgettable moments. Linda gave an emotional toast to the couple, reminding everyone of the importance of true love and honesty. "May you have a long and happy life together, filled with love and understanding," she said, raising her glass. Edward, with tears in his eyes, also made a toast, thanking everyone for being there and celebrating his daughter's and James's love. "I always dreamed of seeing my daughter happy, and today my dream has come true. May God bless you both," Edward said, emotional. James and Melissa thanked everyone, feeling blessed to have so many loved ones around them. The celebration continued late into the night, marking the beginning of a new journey for the couple. And so, with the blessing of friends, family, and colleagues, James and Melissa began their life together, ready to face any challenge with love, trust, and respect. The grand ceremony was just the first step in a journey full of adventures and unforgettable moments. After the magnificent wedding ceremony, James and Melissa set off for their honeymoon, choosing a peaceful, nature-filled destination. They wanted a place where they could relax and enjoy each other's company, away from the hustle and bustle of daily life. The chosen location was a charming country house surrounded by mountains and serene rivers. The house, which had been in James's family for generations, was filled with memories and old stories. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the caretaker, who handed them the keys and wished them a wonderful stay. During the first few days, James and Melissa explored the surroundings, went on hikes, and relaxed in the tranquility of the countryside. One afternoon, while exploring the attic of the house, they found an old wooden chest covered in dust and cobwebs. "What do you think is inside?" Melissa asked, curious. "Let's find out," James replied, carefully opening the chest. Inside the chest, they found old letters, yellowed photographs, and various objects that seemed to be family heirlooms. Carefully, they began to examine the items, discovering a wealth of stories about their family's past. One of the first letters they found was written by Charles, James's father, to Linda. The letter, dated many years ago, spoke about the challenges they faced while building the hotel chain and the unwavering love that kept them united. "James, look at this," Melissa said, holding the letter. "It's from your father to your mother. He talks about how much he loved her and how they faced so many difficulties together." James read the letter attentively, feeling a deep connection with his father. Charles's words were full of passion and determination, and James felt a new admiration for the man who had built the family's legacy. As they continued to explore, they found old photos of Linda and Charles at various stages of their lives. There were wedding photos, pictures from their travels together, and important moments in the building of the hotels. "They really went through a lot together," Melissa commented, moved. "It's incredible to see how their love overcame all obstacles." James agreed, feeling inspired by his parents' strength and love. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Among the letters, they found correspondence between Edward and Charles. The letters revealed that Edward had been a great friend and advisor to Charles, helping him at crucial moments in the business expansion. "I never knew Edward and my father were so close," James said, surprised. "This explains a lot about the connection we feel with him." Melissa looked at James with bright eyes. "And this makes everything even more special, James. Our families have always been connected by deep bonds of friendship and respect, As they continued to rummage through the chest, they found more letters and photos that revealed secrets about the financial difficulties Melissa's family had faced in the past. There was a letter from Edward to Charles, describing the challenges of raising a daughter alone after his wife's death, and how Charles had helped during the most difficult times. "My father always told me about the difficulties we faced, but I never knew Charles was such an important part of our lives," Melissa said, tears in her eyes. James hugged her, feeling even more connected to her. "Our parents were true friends and allies. This explains why we felt so close to each other from the start." The discoveries they made during their honeymoon further strengthened James and Melissa's relationship, knowing that their families had a rich, intertwined history of love, friendship, and overcoming obstacles made them value their union even more. They spent the rest of their honeymoon reflecting on the stories they had discovered and promising to honor their parents' legacy in their own lives together. James and Melissa knew that, like their parents, they could overcome any challenge with love, trust, and mutual respect. And so, with hearts full of new discoveries and an even deeper love, James and Melissa returned from their honeymoon ready to face the future, inspired by their family's stories and strengthened by the bond they shared. The honeymoon had been a transformative experience for James and Melissa. Upon returning to their routine, life seemed richer and more meaningful. Each day was a new opportunity to deepen the love they shared and strengthen the bonds they had with their families. A few weeks after their return, Melissa began to feel different. Initially, she thought it was just the effect of the change in routine, but soon the signs became undeniable. With a racing heart and a mix of nervousness and excitement, she decided to take a pregnancy test. "James, I need to tell you something," Melissa said, finding him in the living room after a long day of work. "What is it, my love?" James asked, concerned by Melissa's serious expression. Melissa held James's hand and, with an emotional smile, said, "I'm pregnant, James. We're going to have a baby." James was speechless for a moment, absorbing the news. His eyes filled with tears of joy, and he hugged Melissa tightly. "This is incredible, Melissa. I'm so happy. We're going to be parents," he exclaimed, kissing her repeatedly. The news of the pregnancy brought a wave of happiness not only to James and Melissa, but also to their families. Linda was radiant at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, and Edward couldn't hide his joy at seeing his daughter start a new family. "This baby is going to bring so much joy to all of us," Linda said emotionally, hugging Melissa. "It's going to be a new beginning for our families," added Edward, smiling. With the baby's arrival, James and Melissa began to plan their future more carefully. They decided to raise their child in an environment of love and humility, ensuring he grew up with the values they both cherished. Determined to maintain his connection to reality and to people, James decided to continue working at the hotel. "I want our child to see that work is important and that humility is an essential value," James explained to Melissa as they discussed their plans. "I agree, James. We want to give him the best of us, and that includes showing him the importance of work and respect for others," Melissa replied, caressing her growing belly. Melissa's pregnancy became a period of preparations and adjustments. James was always by her side, supporting her every step of the way. They began transforming one of the rooms in their apartment into a beautiful nursery, painting the walls in soft colors and decorating it lovingly. Every movement of the baby in Melissa's belly was celebrated with joy and wonder. James often placed his hands on her belly, talking to the baby and expressing all the love he already felt. "I can't wait to meet you, my little one," James whispered, feeling a kick in response. Visits to the doctor and ultrasounds became exciting moments for the couple. Seeing the images of the developing baby reinforced their connection and anticipation for the new family member's arrival. As the months passed, Melissa and James grew even closer. The pregnancy not only brought a new life into the world, but also strengthened their bond. The love and overcoming stories of their families served as a guide and inspiration as they prepared to become parents. Linda and Edward were always present, offering support and advice. Linda often shared stories about when James was a baby, filling Melissa with laughter and useful tips. James was always a bundle of energy. "Get ready for some sleepless nights," Linda joked with a fond smile. Edward, in turn, helped James assemble furniture and prepare the house for the baby's arrival, becoming a devoted and enthusiastic grandfather. "I'll always be here for you and for my grandchild," Edward said, emotional. As the due date approached, James and Melissa felt more prepared and confident. They knew that with the support of their families and the love they shared, they could face any challenge. And so, with hearts full of hope and love, James and Melissa eagerly awaited their child's arrival, ready to start a new journey as parents. Life was about to change wonderfully, and together they were ready for every step of this incredible adventure. The anticipation and excitement dominated the final days before the birth of James and Melissa's son. Each day seemed longer than the previous one, as they both eagerly awaited the arrival of their new family member. When the moment finally came, on a quiet early morning, Melissa began to feel the first contractions. "James, I think it's time," Melissa said, holding his hand tightly. James, already prepared, grabbed Melissa's bag and helped her down to the car. They drove to the hospital, where they were greeted by a caring and ready medical team. The following hours were intense but filled with love and support. James stayed by Melissa's side the entire time, holding her hand and offering words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Melissa. I love you," he whispered, his heart racing with emotion. Finally, after several hours of labor, the sound of the baby's cries filled the room. James and Melissa looked at the little miracle in their arms, their hearts overflowing with joy and gratitude. "He's perfect," Melissa said, tears in her eyes. "Yes, he is," James agreed, emotional. "Welcome to the world, Charles Edward." They decided to name him Charles Edward, in honor of James's and Melissa's fathers. Charles, James's father, and Edward, Melissa's father, were central and inspiring figures in their lives. Naming their son after them was a way to honor the legacy of love, wisdom, and strength that both men had left behind. It was also a constant reminder of the deep bond that united their families. The news of the birth spread quickly, bringing a wave of joy to the whole family. Linda and Edward arrived at the hospital as fast as they could, eager to meet their grandson. "He's beautiful," Linda said, holding little Charles Edward in her arms. "I'm so proud of you both." "He has James's eyes," commented Edward, emotional, "and Melissa's strength." The birth of Charles Edward brought the families even closer. Everyone was involved in caring for the baby, offering unconditional support and love. Linda and Edward visited frequently, helping in any way they could, and cherishing every moment with their grandson. James and Melissa quickly adapted to their new routine, delighted with each small development of Charles Edward. The sleepless nights and initial challenges were overcome with patience and a lot of love. "We're doing this together," James said one night, while rocking the baby to sleep, "and that makes everything easier." "Yes, we're a team," Melissa agreed, smiling. The months passed quickly, and each day brought new joys. Charles Edward's first smile, his first words, and his first steps were celebrated with enthusiasm and emotion. Family gatherings became even more special, with everyone gathered around little Charles Edward. Linda and Edward were dedicated grandparents, always ready to tell stories and play with their grandson. "He's the joy of our lives," Linda said, watching her grandson play in the garden. "And a true symbol of a new beginning for all of us," Edward added, smiling. The environment around Charles Edward was filled with love and gratitude. James and Melissa were determined to raise their son in a home full of respect, humility, and affection, passing on the values they had learned from their own parents. As they watched their son grow, James and Melissa felt more connected than ever. They knew that together they could face any challenge, and that the love they shared was the solid foundation of their family. And so, with the arrival of Charles Edward, a new chapter began in the lives of James and Melissa. The future seemed bright and full of possibilities, and they were ready for every moment of this incredible journey. With love, unity, and gratitude, they celebrated the new beginning that life had given them, knowing that the best was yet to come. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you